Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and welcome to another Critique of the Week. It is Saturday, November 22nd, a rare weekend critique. We had some events. We actually met Billy Collins out in Austin yesterday. Had a lot of fun hanging out with him. His new book is out, Dog Show. He's going to be the guest in the Rattlecast on December 8th. Looking forward to that. Let's see. But it's a fun opportunity to have people participate live who can't usually on the Friday afternoons at 4 p.m. Eastern when it usually is. I know, no time is perfect for everybody. Friday's always a good time, but it's nice to mix in some Saturday shows, some morning shows too. Let's see. So who do we have here, though? I'm interested in seeing who, got the notice that we are a day late and but never a dollar short. Steve Horrell's here. Patty Arbor. L of Arcadium is here. D. Coleman. Michael Ketchum. Good to see you. J.M. Antrobus is here. M. Carr, Winston Munn, Dick Westheimer. Multitasking on this Saturday. Holly York is here. Shauna Bowling. Katie Scruggs Galloway. We've got another poet. Always good to have more poets. Leslie Ann Sketcherson is here. First time joining on the prop lines earlier this week. Hey, Leslie. Let's see. Oh, Katie Dozier in the next room. Hey, Katie, of course. Rose Budden, MW is here too, yeah. All right, so we're going to have a great show. We're going to do what we usually do, a typical critique. We're going to look at some poems. If you are here and you have a poem in the queue, we will go to you for sure today. Well, the first person who says so that I notice. So if you have one in the queue, it's always nice to do somebody who's actually here and go over your poems while we know you're watching. So anybody who has poems in the queue, please let me know. We'll go to that first. But as always, what we're going to do is provide that great workshop experience. It's so valuable, where we talk about poems, talk about our reactions, talk about what works, where our minds drift off, lines of diction that don't make sense, line breaks that don't work, all that kind of thing. Let's see. So Katie Scruggs Galloway says, Dr. Mutto, 54. So who is... We need a better name, I think. Dr. Muto is not going to work. Where's Dr. Muto? Let's see. Maybe it just is Muto the last name. We'll see. No, that's not the last name. So we have to figure out. I need to be able to look it up. So Dr. Muto 54. Noah Draschek. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll go to Noah first. Let me get that spelling right. And let's see what Noah had to offer up for the critique. As always, if you want to have your poems critiqued, all you have to do is submit them. There's a special form on Submittable. You can go to rattle.com/page/critique. It's up there. Also in the menu bar at rattle.com, you'll see the Critique of the Week place. Just go to the Critique of the Week page and then submit 2 poems there. We like to look at 2 because that helps sort of compare the 2. It's always better to triangulate or whatever it's called with 2. Helps to have 2 points to make a line at least. And let's see. So we'll start with Noah Draschek from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 2 poems here. We'll see if any general questions. Here we go. So there is, if you submit to Critique of the Week, there's a form where you can leave any kind of questions you want. If you want us to focus on anything in particular, our goal is always to try to be as helpful as possible. We love poetry. Everybody here loves poetry, and we want to hear the stories that everybody has to share, the perspectives and points of view and the depth of connections. We want to be able to access all that. And so it's sort of helping us all out at the same time, and we want to help you make your poems better. And so that's what we're here for. And there is a slot for questions. If you want to guide us in a certain direction, what you're sort of struggling in particular, anything like that, you can leave it in that window when you send your submission in. And Noah said this: these are selections from a series of fables I'm working on, compiling for a book. I currently have several fables being published, but many other editors are reaching out to me upon rejection to note that these 2 are particularly challenging. Am I giving readers enough of a nudge to seek their own answers, particularly on White Unicorn? Which, to put it as crudely as possible, is an epistemological dick joke and mockery of male myth-making. Editors are just not getting it, hoping for suggestions and or line critiques. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Calamity is not yet come for us. New Fables by Noah Draschek. That's the... So here we have the first poem. We'll put it on screen. And I have to shrink it a little bit, make sure we can fit it all. It's a pretty wide margin. First of all, if for a margin this wide, immediately I see, we couldn't fit it on a regular printed page in this format. And I think, it does, you have to be honest, it does sort of ding the poem a little bit in your eye as an editor if you know it's going to be really tricky to get the poem to work. Now, there would be two options for a poem like this. We could negotiate, kind of work with the poet to make it's more slender on the page so it fits our line width. And that's what we tend to do, and maybe always have done. If it's really important to the poem and it needs to have the shape and we love it, we could print it sideways, which is sort of annoying. You can take, here's a copy of Beloit Poetry Journal, just randomly, but you could take it and turn it so you have to read it like going like that, and then you get 9 inches instead of 6 to work with. So sometimes you can do that too. Occasionally you'll see Poetry Foundation, their magazine, I haven't really seen it anywhere else, has like a fold-out flap. That is really expensive. We would not be paying for that. We don't have a $300 million budget to be printing these magazines, although we love printing them as beautifully as possible. But anyway, let's take a read at Fable number 3, Old Ziz and the Organ. Old Ziz is building an organ the size of Washington State. Bellow will he, screaming pipes, fault lines dance, fungi freak. It is powered by all the winds, birds let pass, through feathers, Ziz gathered them, laid so much pipe, the valves nictate, so many houseflies' eyes. Chords hearken, something beyond, before, revelation, fools await a name beside, not even Ziz knows. Will, maybe that's that the poet will Noah here? Who is listening? What of will is will? Roots upturn, craven, crows, spiders, kamikaze disco. Calamity is not yet come for us. No, come for us. All the little, a tremor, worlds know below foot what proceeds. So that's the first poem. Then the second is White Unicorn. So the poem, you notice I tripped over just trying to match up where to read. We had, if you want, look back at the Rattlecast, there was a poem, and it's called a contrapuntal poem, where you have one poem sort of hidden inside the other poem. And Julia Kolchinsky had a poem like that. And the reason why that worked is because both poems were sort of worked on their own. And it wasn't hard to follow which was which because it was sort of right there in front of you. And with this one, it's a little bit hard jumping around to, when I go from Calamity is yet to come for us, you kind of have to like figure out where am I supposed to read next. That makes it a little difficult. And so anyway, I would advise just to be a little more kind to the reader and pull that in and just make it a little easier to read, first of all. Let's see. Yeah, Holly York says, wow, this is indeed challenging. Jamie Thomas is here too. Yeah. M. Carr says, my eye did not follow it like poet wanted. Yeah. Yeah. And Abigail Cargo says, I like the sounds of the words, but keep losing the thread. Yeah, that's how I feel too. It's just sort of hard to follow. There are a lot of references I don't understand. And just with moving across the page, your mind is sort of preoccupied thinking about like why we're doing this, why we're formatting it this way. And in some ways there's a fragmentation, I think, that works nicely, where you get in sort of this sort of listy, jumpy sort of feel with all the gaps. And it definitely feels unsettled like that. But yeah, exactly. As Patty Arbor said, I use all my focus just trying to read this, no focus left to fall into the poem. And that's how I feel too, just generally. But let's read it again, and we'll see if we can maybe... Yeah. Winston Munn says, I think vertical works better than this horizontal format. Yeah. And I didn't really get to it. I was saying if it was a contrapuntal poem, it's hard to know. So if I read like all the little words know what precedes, is that its own thing that we should read right here? Oops. That, just this side. Is that something we should read separately as well? Are these like micropoems too somehow? Is there a row rolling down? State fungi freak through feathers, so many houseflies' eyes. Fools await a name, not even Ziz knows, will whoever hear. Spider's Disco. I mean, it kind of works as a poem because it's so choppy and fragmented. So I'm not really sure how I'm even supposed to approach reading the poem, which makes it tricky too. Let's read it again, though. Take it from the top. Fable number 3, Old Ziz and the Organ. Old Ziz is building an organ the size of Washington State. So to start, I don't know who Old Ziz is, but it's specific, and then he's doing something concrete and specific, building an organ the size of Washington State. So along that far into the poem, I'm along and understand what's going on and enjoying it. Bellow will he, screaming pipes, and I wonder why my first sort of question as a reader, I'm not talking about as an editor, just as a reader trying to engage with this poem and understand it and appreciate it, is why is that inverted? Why is it bellow will he instead of he will bellow? Why are we going against the grain of syntax normally? And English is a nice language where that's possible, but I'm not sure. Screaming pipes, fault lines dance, fungi freak. It is powered by all the winds, birds let pass through feathers. So all the winds, I like a lot of the images and some phrases. So the concept of all the winds, birds let pass through feathers. That's a really interesting idea that I haven't seen before. I like that. I like how far it's pushing into imagination. I think that's the real strength of the poem. Ziz gathered them, laid so much pipe. The valves nictate. I'm not sure what nictate means. I'd like to learn that word. Let's look it up really quickly. Nictate. It means to blink or wink. Okay. The most common general meaning is to rapidly close and open one's eyes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so just a synonym for blink. And one of the cool, again, I guess we're talking up the English language today, but one of the cool things about English language is we're really great at absorbing and adopting words. So we have like twice as many words as most languages to work with, because all those people that invaded England brought to their languages, and we added a bunch of languages, and then we could add new ones anytime. So that's a nice aspect of it. Anyway, birds let pass through feathers. Ziz gathered them, laid so much pipe, the valves nictate, they blink, so many houseflies' eyes. Okay, so I'm seeing that. Chords hearken. And now when I see hearken, I don't know why, I'm thinking of like chorus music. I guess hark the herald angels sing. Chords hearken, something beyond, before. Are we supposed to read something beyond, before, beside Revelation? Are we supposed to like swirl down the page in the poem? Like, it's really struggling to know how to read it. Something beyond, before, beside Revelation. Fools, a way to name, not even Ziz knows. Is that how it's supposed to be read? So Will, and then we kind of Craven Crow's Kamikaze, Spider's Disco. I don't know. I find it a little hard to know what's what. But Will, whoever here, who's listening, what of Will is Will? So this is where I start to get just lost in the poem. Not only, and maybe part of it is because it becomes more difficult to read. But part of it, I have trouble at this point following. So he, made this pipe. There's that nice image of the valves flashing like so many houseflies' eyes, those compound lenses. That's neat. Then the clouds hearken, something beyond, before, beside Revelation. Fools, a way to name, not even Ziz knows. But so why are they fools? Who are these fools? It gets, I guess, so abstract that I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the blank is supposed to be. Everything else is in italics, so I think it's like I don't want to say the author is why I thought that. You see that sometimes because we're not supposed to include personal information within the poems to reveal your identity at Rattle anyway. But also, you're not supposed to say the name of Yahweh in some religions and contexts, and so maybe that's what that is. I'm not really sure. But again, that trips me up with the confusion of that. Then who is listening? What of Will is Will? Roots upturn, Craven Crows, Spiders, Kamikaze Disco. I guess I can see that the organ is being played so loud, but I've sort of lost the plot at this point. Calamity has not yet come for us. I think maybe it's supposed to be read in like chunks. Calamity has not yet come for us. A tremor below foot. All the little worlds know what precedes. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I just lose the thread of what's going on. Let's see what everybody else is saying. Maybe people can offer insight to me for the poem. Yeah, M. Carr says, would a lot of these questions be answered if we read the collection? That's always a really good question. And there are some collections where the poems don't stand on their own, but then together they make something really interesting because you know what's going on. It feels like these are all different fables, that it's supposed to be self-contained, though. Yeah. And Katie Struggs Gallery says, I'm into it, intriguing images, but the form is distracting, and I feel the music and meaning story should take priority over form. I mean, I generally agree with that, too. I'm not sure. I think there's just not enough in the second half of the poem that we can follow, though. Like, I just lose the plot. And it's not really, even though on the first read, it's hard to follow given the form, I don't think the form's the issue. I think moving into the abstract without sort of setting the stage, without giving context and grounding, so we don't know. I mean, we don't know who Ziz is. Maybe we can look up, if I look up old Ziz, but I've never, and having read about like 2 million poems, I've never heard one about old Ziz. So Ziz is is a giant griffin-like bird in Jewish mythology, said to be large enough to be able to block out the sun. Okay. So old Ziz is building an organ, but why an organ? I don't know. And then I don't know what to do with the second half of the poem. So it feels like it sets up something interesting. I don't mind that I have to go look up new Ziz, but it's like, where does the poem go from that? Will whoever here, who is listening, what if Will is Will? Then the roots upturn, Craven and Crow's Kamikaze. So there's this sort of like end times type thing going from all the music. Calamity has not yet come for us, a tremor below foot. So there's like stuff you can hear. All the little worlds know what precedes. If I'm supposed to read it that way, what little worlds, and I don't know. I just don't know what I'm supposed to take away from the second half of the poem. So it sets up something interesting and then doesn't really give me anything to work with after that. I think that's really the issue with the poem. The main issue is the second half, where it's going. Yeah. Yeah, as Katie Strokes Gallery says, 1465, the collection Bow Down by Karen Green has poems that are interrelated and don't really stand alone. Yeah, there's some great collections that do that. PMB says, what are the fools? And yeah, that's sort of the problem. Katie Strokes Gallery says, oh, is it like how the book of Revelation says God has a name for us, only he knows? Yeah, I mean, that's it. But we decode, we sort of pick our way through to follow that, and then so what? How did that add to any kind of mythology, or how did that push a story farther? How did our understanding of anything become deeper? It's a code. If we look up some of the illusions, and then we can see what that is. But what's the point after that? I think that's the part that's really missing. Yeah, Katie Scrooge Kelly says, I'm honestly so invested, would love to see the revision. Yeah. And Jamie Thomas says, the scattering at the end feels like secrets being passed between the two people. Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it, too. Okay. Well, let's move on to the other poem and see what it is. So basically, just in general, though, the interesting images, interesting setup, we're engaged. There's some good lines. The jumping around, the disjointedness sort of works, but it's like too much and becomes too much to follow and take in. I think it's the general rule of this, and the poem doesn't really elaborate on itself enough for us to feel happy with the investment we put into it, I think is how I'd describe it. Let's see if the other poem fits that or if it works differently. Fable number 8, White Unicorn. Ecthirnir, the heart is called, that stands o'er Odin's hall and bites from Lod's branches. From his horns fall drops into Hvargelmir. Once all the waters rise, from Prose Edda. That's it. my brother, upon seeing a white giraffe at the Philadelphia Zoo circa 1988. So that's another quote, I believe. And then this, it's a Japanese text in Kirin Eklidoceros. I'm not sure what that means. When legend becomes fact, Chinese unicorn and Lucidic giraffes, hearts crowned with weaved wicker ossified by eon's wisdom, instead but nubs. Verity sings no songs, nor blazons tapestries, memories, membranes writ of men in their tall tales. All right. So, again, I think, we got the hint for this one, which I think we definitely would have needed about the what the men's and their tall tales are. Sort of, the phallic humor, which has a long literary tradition, like will to boot and will and over thus, there's a ton of that just throughout history, and that, so it's not like shocking to have in literature. It's hard to, and that's the whole poem. So White Unicorn, there's these two, I like the humanizing second epigraph. I like the setup of those two epigraphs with that's it, seeing the white giraffe. Don't know what these mean. I can kind of Google and see again, but there's just so little to tap into here. Let's see. Euclideros is an extinct genus of large deer whose fossils have been discovered across Eurasia, from Europe to China. Okay, so the huge deer. Okay. When legend becomes fact, Chinese unicorn and Lucidic giraffes. I don't know what Lucidic is either. Yeah, and here it says that's not even the right word. It should be leucistic, but I don't know. It's not, but that is the scientific word, I guess, for albinism. A partial, but not complete loss of pigmentation. Okay. Whew. Okay, so when legend becomes fact, Chinese unicorn and Lucidic giraffe, so the two things we're talking about in the epigraphs, hearts crowned with weaved wicker ossified by eon's wisdom, instead but nubs. Okay, Verity sings no songs nor blazons tapestries. Memories, membranes writ of men and their tall tales. All right. Well, I don't know. We just have so little to work with. Yeah. Yeah, Katie Scruggs Galley said, that's it? All men can erect or something? Let us in on the jab. Yeah. Dick Westheimer says, a question for Tim and everyone else. What do you think of story poems where there is not even a shadow of the poet or the stakes for the poet? Well, a poem is always the story of a voice, because poetry is the music of speech. And, there's ways you can write. There are great poems I love. The one that just automatically always comes to mind is Autobiography of Red, which is a verse-length novel by Anne Carson. And that's literally, it's a fiction story in verse, and I think that works as poetry. You find a way, like method acting, which is why I love those Jack Grapes classes that Rattle sprung from, method writing, where you inhabit a character. And because of the way our minds are actually fragmented and we disassociate and we use empathy and we create models of other people, you can step inside some other character and learn something about yourself and the world. And so that works fine as long as you're inhabiting, embodying that, and finding something in there that's with depth. And you can use that still as a tool to understand things. So I don't think there's anything at all wrong with not having the poet themselves in the poem. I think that's completely unnecessary. And it's sort of easier and more common maybe to do that with lyric eye that we talk about sometimes, and have self-referential poems to talk about our psychology or whatever. But if you, there are a lot of great poems that don't do that. And so I think, Yeah, Jamie Thomas says, if it's a well-told story, I'm sat and happy. Yeah. Venture Capital says, I think adding some plain language could really elevate it. The linguistic surround here may skew and charge the plainness. Yeah. And Jamie Thomas says, there's too much outside work that has to be done to understand this. I need a little more of an inroad, and I adore puzzles. This just asks too much. Yeah, and it's what I would call puzzle poetry, where it feels to me, reading it, like the point is unlocking this sort of intricate puzzle with language someone made. And I know some people who enjoy poetry like that, but it's not. It's a small subset of poetry readers, which are already a small subset of people. And personally, it's not a kind of poetry that I've ever gravitated toward. And it always feels to me, I guess the problem is it feels like a gimmick. It feels like once you figure out how to do a Rubik's Cube, it ends up being completely unsatisfying. Like there's a way that the effort is interesting to figure out a Rubik's Cube, but then once you know how to do it, there's a way you do it, and it's unsatisfying in the end, because all you did was make the colors go from this way to a mess to a pattern. And that's kind of how it feels. Like if poetry, and I do believe poetry is a magic spell, it has to be transformative. Something has to come about because of this utterance that we gave. The world, our understanding, has to be transformed. And the problem with poems that are puzzles, to me, is they don't end up transformative. The only transformative thing is the thing that the poet already knew, that was just occluded behind this like scrim of all the things that they chose not to tell me. And I find that both frustrating and unsatisfying at the end of the day. And so personally, it's just not a poetry that I gravitate toward. And I think you'd find, very few readers do, which is not to say that there aren't poetry writers, readers for that. It's just, they're going to be hard to find. So that's my thoughts on that kind of thing. Let's see. So I just want more, I mean, yeah. Steve Horrell says, well, I'm puzzled. Yeah. Hamid Malik says, we just don't have much time. Yeah. And Michael Ketchum says puzzle poetry. That's it. Yeah, it is. And if you unlock it, I mean, okay, let's do, and I think this is Dick Westheimer's favorite example. It's the, what's the title? Sylvia Plath's. It's Sylvia Plath's poem. Is it 9? Yeah, 9 syllables. No, metaphors. Okay, we'll do this one. This is a puzzle poem, but feel the difference in this. This is metaphors, Sylvia Plath. I'm a riddle in 9 syllables, an elephant, a ponderous house, a melon strolling on 2 tendrils. Oh, red fruit, ivory, fine timbers. This loaf's big with its yeasty rising. Money's new minted in this fat purse. I'm a means, a stage, a cow and calf. I've eaten a bag of green apples. Boarded the train, there's no getting off. So that's metaphors. That's Sylvia Plath. And it is a puzzle. And it says up front, I'm a riddle in 9 syllables. Each of the line is 9 syllables. There's 9 lines. And each line has an answer for what it is. So it's like literally a riddle. And when you've realized what it is, which you do after reading it a few times, if you didn't right away, it's a pregnant woman. So there's 9 syllables, 9 months, and all of those lines are metaphors for being pregnant. But the reason why it works is because each of those work as poems always work, which is that transformative, surprising change the way you experience the reality of things. Seeing somebody as an elephant, a ponderous house, a melon strolling on 2 tendrils, that's a great description that will change the way you actually see, somebody who's very pregnant walking by. Saying, I've eaten a bag of green apples, bored of the train, there's no getting off, gets to some of the feeling that I can't, as a man, can experience being pregnant and being, a ponderous house. But I get to experience some of that experience through the metaphor that's being presented there. So it's a riddle, but it's also a poem. And I think that's when riddle poems work. They have to have the stuff of poetry in them to really work. And maybe if you unlock, and that's the problem with these riddle poems, maybe if you take the time, unlock, realize what's going on inside the riddle that is the poem, maybe there'll be cool stuff in there that you learn from and get to experience reality, with more nuance because of, but maybe not. And then we're sitting here with more things to do. I have other poems I could be reading. I have other books, if this is a great poet who I know is writing things that I've loved in the past, and if I decode this thing, there'll probably be something wonderful at the end of the rainbow, then maybe I'll take the time to do it. But if it's just a poem I'm encountering in a book or a magazine, I'm just not going to invest the time in it because so often there is not an actual payoff. And that's just a fact of the reality of mortality and the fact that our lives are finite, And so it's a hard thing to try to be doing. And the key really to doing it successfully is having all the other things included in poetry within the puzzle too. Have sonorous music, have metaphors, and have a speaker's voice that's consistent, and then have it be a riddle on top of that, and that's great, But if all it has is the puzzle, then it feels like I'm just doing, like putting a puzzle together, And it's nice to pass the time maybe, but it's not satisfying on like a spiritual level, and that's what I'm always looking for poems to do, is a means to spiritual growth, really. So anyway, that is my thoughts on that. Let me see what... Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so Jamie Thomas points out Hilla Doolittle's Eurydice is an absurd riddle poem that I just adore. I think it's because I know the key to the story of Eurydice. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's some examples of that work. Yeah, Dry Montito says, I think the poem is trying to think about the relationship between the real and the imagined world. A Kirin is a creature imagined by people who have been informed of giraffes, but never seen one himself. That is interesting. Well, it's so short. Let's read it again in that context. Can we decode this? I think the poem is trying to think about the relationship between the real and imagined world. Kirin, okay, okay. Well, read it one more time. Why not? Here. When legend becomes fact, Chinese and unicorn and Lucidic giraffes, hearts crowned with weaved wicker, ossified by eons wisdom. See, I have trouble. There's a playfulness to that line, but I have trouble figuring out what it literally means. Wisdom instead, but nubs. Verity sings no songs nor blazons tapestries. So the truth is boring, is basically all it's saying. Memory is membrane, rid of men and their tall tales. And so, like imagining a giraffe, but then a giraffe being real, and imagining it as myth, there's something interesting there. It's not played with. It's not like presented to us in a way that makes us really ponder and reflect on that, I'd say. So I just want more and more and more, and some clarity too, even with the complicated play and the riddle aspect. I want clarity on top of that. Okay, that's going to wrap up. I think we said enough to this. Okay. And so Dr. Muto, again, here, and the poet, Noah Droschek, says, your bewilderment was instructive. Well, great. I mean, that's all we can hope for. And the other thing is, if you love this kind of poet, and I'm speaking directly to you, Noah, if you love this kind of poetry, you read other people who write this kind of poetry, or it's a kind of poetry you think is missing because you love it, like, keep doing it. And when people don't get it, explain it and push it forward and make it a thing that we start to enjoy. Be you. And if everybody tries to be themselves and follow what their instincts and their hearts are pushing forward while paying attention to the feedback and finding our bewilderment instructive, that's great. And maybe we can all push it together that way. Okay, we're going to move on now to another poet. And here we go. I have to clear the filters, though. Hang on. And then put... 1 second as I resort these submissions. We'll just go back to the oldest poems in the queue for the last 25 minutes or so. And the oldest one in here is still, we got this flood of poems in March, so we're March 25th. Peggy Morrison from California is here with 2 shortish poems. No general questions. we've got Let Me Move. Let Me Move Like a Tide Come In, and My BFF, okay? Here comes poem number 1. Let me move like a tide come in. Waves roll up the beach, foam edges each with their weight of water. Layered patterns move and dissolve and disappear into gray sand. Lines meet and reshape. Arcs, triangles, sails. Okay. Offshore, layered wave horizons, chameleon-like in peripheral vision, echo and pulse, constant backdrop, reflect clouded sky. Just there, a black mountain, wet from the spray, solid and still, my feet in cold salt water, my small steps at ocean's edge, gulls cry, my face moist, my hair blowing. I feel transparent, elemental. I walk this landscape, part of it, small in it, without boundary, inside tide, finding tide inside. All right, so that's Let Me Move Like a Tide Come In. There's an interesting way. We talk sometimes about poems that don't have punctuation and how it can make them difficult to read. Here we have a poem without punctuation that uses no enjambment, basically. It makes it so each line sort of lists itself out as a discrete unit, and that makes it so it's not difficult to read at all. It actually rolls out pretty easily reading the poem. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you want to do poems without punctuation and have that sort of free floating feel. Is that if you have, if you put the line breaks at the level of the sort of unit of speech, then it's actually not hard to read at all. And so that's one thing you can do if you want to. The main thing for this one is there's a disjointed sort of distance from the poem at the beginning that completely changes, and then we enter the poem with the speaker when the speaker comes into the poem, surprisingly enough. So my feet in cold salt water, my small steps at ocean's edge. You know, once we get to that point, did you feel in yourself as we were reading it like a sort of a I don't know, like finally. Like it's like a relief to get that subject to connect to. So there's too much, description that's not connected to anything at the beginning. And so we're sort of desperate for finding the subject of the poem. And it comes in very late, but once it does, we're like relieved. And I think a key is to get the subject in right away. The one I did really recently, so it comes to mind, is Abandoned Bicycle by George Bulgare. We'll pull this up again really quick. So at the beginning of George's poem, he says this. He says, "A bicycle, a nice one, has been locked to the lamppost all summer long. Tires gone flat, a congregation of leaves worshiping the wheels." So he goes on, and then he enters the poem, but he's sort of built this scene from the perspective of a person. You can imagine the person there looking at it, and then he enters the poem. And here the difference is there's no sense of where the witness is coming from, if that makes more sense. So waves roll up the beach, foam edges each with their weight of water, layered patterns move and dissolve and disappear into gray sand, lines meet. So we could be looking from like really high above. We could be looking from a distant cliff. We could be looking from like right there near the sand with a microscope. It's really hard to like get a sense of where the speaker is positioned. Whereas in George's poem, because you're standing there in front of a bicycle and it's describing that field of view right there, it makes it work without having the speaker enter later. Or having the speaker enter later, I should say. The poem still works. We don't feel ungrounded because of that, because we know the subject and we get to see it described like a painting would be. Here, we don't have that sort of frame to start with, which makes the description feel at a remove. And so then it feels satisfying when the speaker comes in. So my advice, first of all, would be to bring the speaker in earlier so we get a sense of who we're connecting with. And that would help the poem move better. Yeah. So, yeah. Let me look at the notes. Let's see. So Michael Ketchum says, move the stanza, my feet in salt water to the beginning. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. My feet in cold salt water, my small steps at ocean's edge. Waves roll up the beach, foam edges each with their weight of water. Layered patterns move and dissolve, dissolve and disappear. See how much better that feels? And that's exactly it. You can just get the subject matter. It's not really, I think it's wrong when we say subject or speaker. It's like perspective. Like when we have a sense of the perspective or how the perspective can move. And like there's a way that like in film, a camera angle can move. If we get a sense of that, then we can feel like we're connected to the thing, whatever it is that's speaking the poem to us. And so getting that up top, I think it's a great suggestion. Just helps the poem out tremendously. The other thing that I felt too reading this poem is that it repeats itself a lot. So I think it could really be condensed. So not only get that, get this my stanza up above so we get a sense of where we are right away, but keep an eye out for descriptions that are describing something that was already described, because that doesn't have this any kind of weight to it anymore once we already sort of see that there. So let me try to find an example of like what I'm talking about. Let me move like a tide come in. Waves roll at the beach, foam edges each with their weight of water. Layered patterns move and dissolve, dissolve and disappear into gray sand. Lines meet and reshape. Arcs, triangles, sails. So I like the lines meet and then reshape, but we already have this description of layered patterns moving and then dissolving. So it's a very similar description. And I think if we see the one thing very clearly, the one metaphor for it really clearly, it's almost like there's a mixed metaphor thing going on when you add too many descriptions of the same thing. Like we already saw it. You're just complicating the clarity of what you showed us already. And there are a few more instances of that kind of thing. But it was the fact that this sounds very similar to this. We already kind of saw it. And I think the second one is better. I would like to see that you could make it a little more clear in what we're seeing. So I like the gray sand, the lines meet and reshape, arcs, triangles, sails. You could go on and explain in detail like how they look, the darker versus the lighter, the little crystals, some kind of make the image of it a little more clear. Just one more line I think would be helpful at that point in the poem. Offshore layered wave horizons. And we already talked about waves a bunch. The waves are rolling up the beach. We already talked about the weight of water. So this, again, the layered wave horizons, chameleon-like and perfect. Like it feels like we're just sort of rehashing the same. We're spinning our wheels here. Echo and pulse, constant backdrop, reflect clouded sky. And the clouded sky is a little, I think you could cut this whole stanza really. Chameleon-like is a little, to describe that as chameleon-like is a little bit interesting, but it's not enough to justify 5 whole lines in this poem, I don't think. So I'd cut like a little bit of there and then cut all this and move this up to the top. And then we get a sense of the poem. And let's read it that way. If I can do it. My feet cold in salt water, my small steps at ocean's edge, waves roll up the beach, foam edges each with their weight of water, into gray sand, lines meet and reshape, arcs, triangles, sails. Just there, a black mountain wet from the spray, solid and still. Gulls cry, my face moist, my hair blowing. I feel transparent, elemental. I walk in this landscape, part of it, small in it, without boundary, inside tide, finding tide inside. And I do like that ending too. I like the feeling the tide within you, which is really interesting. Of course, we're 78% water, as they say. I'm not sure if that's literally true or just a fact that's not true that's spread around, but that is interesting thinking about it that way. So I think that's what I would do is tighten it up and get the speaker out front. JM, I think that's Michael Antrobus, probably, with a different handle. For a while there, I thought the speaker was a sand crab with its small steps making a pattern in the sand that the waves were washing away. I love that. I kind of wish that was the case. Yeah, and thanks for pointing this out, because I meant to put a pin onto it and come back to it. The Black Mountain just there feels like it's introducing something but not explored. And yeah, I wonder what that is too. So, I don't know, but it's interesting. The ending is really nice. So it's how do we get to the ending without losing the good aspects of the poem, which is I'm here thinking about my connection to this. Yeah. Yeah, Winston Munn says, Archie Bell in the Drells poem, do the tighten up. Yeah. And Shauna Bowling says, stacked, mounded, heaped, synonyms for layering. Yeah. 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 So anyway, it's a matter of, I guess, maybe how concise you can actually make it. Like, maybe it could be like just the end. Maybe we don't need much of this at all. I like the different shapes, though. I like this I like that section. Maybe we could squeeze that in. Maybe we could just jump through, though, and get the whole poem at that length. I feel transparent, too, and elemental. Anyway, let's take a look at the other poem. This is My BFF is Waiting. Hiss of the oxygen machine, her steady state, lungs clogged by heavy fluid. She shuffles through the house, transparent plastic tubes like tidewater eddying around her ankles. My BFF is living day to day, stranded mama polar bear, ice floe melting. My BFF's eyes are coal-edged, horizontal teardrops. We are pulling strokes towards sacred space we created, familia. We touch wooden drums our teacher made with his hands, connect across the picnic table, finding how the rhythms go together. Obatala, Abaluye, Oshun. My BFF carries her heavy heart. She draws her loved ones close. We wrap her in our bodies. My BFF asks me to carry the droning oxygen machine. We go to the elevator, her diagnosis looming. But we don't look ahead. We stay at today. Lavender twilight, we sit on the deck beneath Monterey pine. We eat charred elote with butter. The freeway rumbles in plain sight. All right, so here, and I think we can see kind of the things that were working well in the last poem more starkly, I think, here. There's a really great beginning. The first stanza, hiss of the oxygen machine, her steady state, lungs clogged by heavy fluid. She shuffles through the house, transparent plastic tubes like tidewater eddying around her ankles. It's just a great description. We're really in that moment and image because it's described so clearly and well. And then we get to some more abstract images and these listing things where we're just sort of punching things out. Stranded mama polar bear, ice floe melting. Do you feel how less... And partly it's because it's the image is developed more, and partly it's because there are whole sentences. She shuffles through the house, transparent plastic tubes like tidewater eddying around her ankles. That's a great sentence. But stranded mama polar bear, ice floe melting is not a sentence. It doesn't have the music. It's a list of things. And that pulls us out of our connection with the speaker, which pulls us out of our connection to the poem, because the whole thing is making us have this empathetic thing where we become the voice of the speaker. The poem becomes us temporarily, and that's why it's so moving and intimate. And we don't have that when we're yanked out of it by those kind of riffs of just words. Speak whole sentences, and you'll have more connection to it. And then it's the specific detail, too. So my BFF's eyes are coal-edged, horizontal teardrops. We are pulling strokes towards sacred space we created, familia. So pulling strokes towards sacred space is one concept here, and we created familia is one concept here, but feel how abstract they are. They're so different than lungs clogged by heavy fluid. She shuffles through the house, transparent plastic tubes like tidewater eddying around her ankles. That is so concrete, and that's what we talk about with concrete language. We want things that we can really see because that's what we really connect with, and that is so concrete and real. And then then we are pulling strokes towards sacred space we created, familia, does nothing compared to the power of those concrete images and details in that first stanza. And so do first stanza stuff. Don't do third stanza stuff. And the poems will be a lot more powerful and tighter. And the kind of thing we created, familia, that's a concept, an abstraction that you want us to understand on like a cellular level. You want us to feel that familia. And we do if we can enter a voice in an image, in a detail, in a scene clearly enough to get there like we do with that first stanza. And so it also is like the show don't tell type stuff that's just common workshop advice too. This is showing and this is telling. And you can feel a difference in the emotional connection to the content at those spots. And then, we touch wooden drums our teacher made with his hands connect across the picnic table. So suddenly we're at a picnic table, which is a little surprising because we don't understand, how we got there is a little, disjointed. Finding how the rhythms go together. Again, I think, the wooden drums that we touch made with hands, like that works because it's concrete and strong. We can feel that. The finding how the rhythms go together is more abstract again, so we get more distance. My BFF carries her heavy heart. She draws her loved ones close. Again, draws her loved ones close. That's the we created familia level. That's not connecting on that deep, profound way that the beginning stanza does. She draws her loved ones close. We wrap her in our bodies. My BFF asked me to carry the droning oxygen machine. We go to the elevator, her diagnosis looming, but we don't look ahead. We stay at today. So again, we stay at today. The abstractions are what aren't working. And then we get back to detail again, and the poem once again becomes engaging. Lavender twilight, we sit on the deck beneath Monterey pine. Again, the detail, it's specific Monterey pine. There's the lavender twilight on the deck, so we're very much in that scene. We eat charlotte with butter. The freeway rumbles in plain sight, and because you have the image, because the image sits there strongly, that becomes a representative of, I guess, the world moving on with or without her. This BFF who's has a difficult diagnosis looming, and so that becomes a symbolic understanding of what we're talking about, and we feel it a lot more, even though it's harder to articulate what that meant because it's told in that concrete, detailed way. And so just write stanzas like this, and write stanzas like this up here, and that's what good poetry is. Don't get into the abstractions which cut us off. Another thing I want to mention: my BFF is living today. It becomes a kind of refrain. My BFF, and to me that's good. Is I was listening to a cover of Leonard Cohen's song "Democracy in the USA." Democracy is coming in the USA, and it's just. That has that refrain that just repeats all the time, but it's so creative with the verses and how they intertwine with the rhymes and the rhythms of that, and how detailed they play out against that refrain that is coming. And I think that's a perfect example of how to use refrain in poems, is to have that, but then extend it into something really concrete and detailed, like these first stanzas were. So still the similar kind of thing. Just make sure these connect to things like this, and then the poem will really work too. And I think the BFF is a good refrain. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, Brian O'Sullivan said the refrain. Hey, Brian, good to see you. Petty Arbor said, I thought the BFF was the oxygen machine. And that's a difficulty with, using an acronym like that, a slang kind of thing like that, is that some people don't know what that is. BFF means best friend forever, which is an acronym, used in text messaging and stuff, I guess. I mean, I think it's been around. People say that for 20 years-ish. Yeah. PMB says, is it legal to say twilight in poems? That's funny. If it works, yeah, sure. You can say anything in a poem. Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, I think we'll move on. Let's do one more poem before we wrap it up. So those two were from Peggy Morrison. Thanks for sharing those, Peggy. But yeah, the details, yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at one more, as long as it's not too long. Let's see. A little bit longer. Let's see if this is a short one. Okay, we'll do these two. These are relatively short. The two poems by Terry Jude Miller. You know what? Terry's here a lot. I think we'll wait because he's not here. Terry's not here, right? No. We'll wait till Terry's actually here. We'll do these next week for Terry. So it is more fun when the poet is actually here. Well, I'm flipping through. Sorry for the slight delay. I just don't want to do anything really long. And the poems that I keep clicking to happen to be kind of long. Let's see. Okay, here's a better one. These are sonnet lengthish or a little bit longer. Here go. There's your two from Joe Red from Michigan. Take a look. May asked Dana why. Oh, wait. Let me look at the if there's questions first, too. Yeah. So Joe says this. Thank you for considering this for Critique of the Week. Do you think any of the rhyming is forced simply to suit the form? Is made too romantic, too sweet? My goal with that poem was to evoke, well, we don't really want to read that yet. Is it too simplistic or sophisticated? We're going to skip the goals for now. The couplet at the end purposely uses straightforward language. Is it too straightforward? That's kind of things Joe's asking. Let's take a look. There we go. May ask Dana why. At a yard sale, Dana found a light fleece, the same brand and color as one May keeps, buried with clothes saved from vacation. But this one has defects she'll wear even though it's not quite right. The cottagecore blouse was next to it and still in the box new. But when May asked Dana why the same fleece, she said, I don't know, I just wanted to. She bought a pair of jeans like May had worn, but they didn't give as well when she ran with the dog. Wait, sorry. Let me read this again. She bought a pair of jeans like May had worn, but they didn't give as well when she ran with the dog or reached up to the cabinet above the stove to get the first aid kit if it was a bad day. She'd pull them on, sometimes saying they might even fit you. But when May asked why not wear your old worn, she said, I don't know. I just wanted to. She chose a new shirt, green and yellow plaid, pattern and colors like the one May had, always laid on the back of an armchair, across from the daybed they had to share if the fire died out. She could have picked red, pencil, stripe, or floral orange and blue. But when May asked Dana why the same plaid, she said, I just like taking care of you. Well, that's sweet. So as far as the rhymes go, I like the rhymes. There's some slant rhymes. There's some true rhymes. It feels very casual. I don't have a problem. I like the rhymes. I think I had a little bit of trouble with sort of some of the sentence lengths and some of the lack of punctuation for the long sentences. And I think maybe it'd be good to have more variation in sentence length too. So they're all very long sentences, and that gets a little bit tedious to read, I think, is maybe an issue. Let me see what everybody else is saying. Yeah, some punctuation after first aid kit is what someone says. Jamie Thomas says, like the conversational tone. I definitely agree with that. I like that. If she's talking about this poem. The last poem, too. Worn at the end of the second stanza is a great opportunity for enjambment, says Dick Westheimer. Yeah. And Desi Cochrane said it's nice to see enjambment with nice punctuation used so well. Yeah, and I agree. Yeah. Okay. So let's read again. May asked Dana why. At a yard sale, I think one of the issues, too, is that it's hard to keep track. When you have two names, it's hard to keep track of who's who. And it's one of those things you kind of really have to keep establishing because we really forget. And then you lose track of just following in the movie. Katie and I were watching Sliding Doors last night before bed. That old movie, like Gwyneth Paltrow and someone else. It was hilariously like 90s and kind of bad, to be honest. But they had this, in one version of like two versions of reality, and you had to kind of follow them. And they had one where she had a short haircut and one with a long haircut, and that's how you could follow. You kind of need that. You need that, like, this is the person with this, and this is the person with this, and so you can keep track in your head. And I lose track of who's who a little bit for me in this poem. And so maybe keep touching on which one's which would be helpful, or what the relationship is. But anyway, May asked Dana why. At a yard sale, Dana found a light fleece, the same brand and color as one May keeps. See, I like that fleece keeps. That's nice. Buried with clothes saved from a vacation. But this one has defects. So here, I think, give us a break and end this sentence already. Like, put a period there, and then we just got to catch our breath. We kind of go too long in these long lines. But this one has defects she'll wear even though it's not quite right. A cottagecore blouse was next to it and still in the new box. But when May asked Dana why the same fleece, she said, I don't know. I just wanted to. Yeah. Okay, well, she bought the same fleece. She bought a pair of jeans like May had worn, but they didn't give as well when she ran with the dog or reached up to the cabinet above the stove to get the first aid kit. If it was a bad day. And of course, we wonder what the bad day is. And it's this many lines, 4 lines really without any punctuation. And it just really makes it a little bit like you're kind of waiting for a break. You don't get it. So I would add the commas where they should be. She'd pull them on sometimes, saying they might even fit you. But when May asks why not wear your old worn... Yeah, so the old worn, I'm not sure what it's even rhyming with. Ran? Worn on? But we repeat worn here, and that's the more stronger recollection. And we had the same thing here with fleece and fleece. Oh, but that's intentional. Plaid and plaid, so that's interesting. I guess what it is, there's something that strikes me as off about the line, and I think it's just that saying why not wear your old worn doesn't feel natural. That's the one that's forced. And I guess it's an interesting, I've never seen this form where we have the first line and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line have the same word at the end. And that's fine. That's cool. I like that. But it feels like it's written to force, like it's just not something someone would say. So it feels, that rhyme feels forced. She said, I don't know, I just want to. She chose a new shirt, green and yellow plaid, patterned, and colors like the one May had always laid on the back of an armchair, across from the daybed they had to share if the fire died out. So there's nice enjambment there. See how nicely that reads? Across from the daybed they had to share if the fire died out. There's like a bit of a natural pause, but we continue, and it feels nice to read that. She could have picked red, pencil stripe, or floral orange and blue. But when May asked Dana why the same plaid, she said, I just like taking care of you. Well, what does everybody think of that sort of the ending? Yeah, Jamie Thomas says, I'd like to know what characterizes a bad day in the frame of it always needing a first aid kit. Yeah, it feels like... it feels like that's, like the Chekhov's gun that never fired. We really don't know what the situation is, what a bad day is, why it needs a first aid kit. And she likes taking care, but why? We're left in the dark, and maybe the title could explain some more of the story and let us in a little more. All right. Yeah. Yeah, Venture Capital says the ending stops on dialogue, which is the right instinct, but there's no image to land on. Yeah, and Patty Arbor says, I'm reading this, changing it to first-person prose poem in my mind, thinking it might get to the understory. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where I just feel... I feel like I want more of the story. I feel like I get a little bit of it. Jamie Thomas says, yes, what is she taking care of and why? Yeah. Holly York feels a sinister vibe, which I didn't feel, but there's so much sort of ambiguity. We don't get the story that it's easy for that sinister feel to creep in. Yeah. So for this one, the main thing is I'd like more of the story. And we kind of just went in a circle. I guess maybe the real thing is I don't know. Even though she says, I just like taking care of you. Why does she want the same blouse that her friend already has but doesn't wear? I mean, not only instead of asking to borrow it or something, but I don't know, there's something weird. And maybe creepy is right. Maybe creepy is the right feeling for that. That Holly York feels as a sinister vibe. I mean, maybe she is kind of like cloning her friend or something. I'm not sure. I don't know what to make of it, but I want to know more about that. Why this... the light fleece, she wants it the same brand when she could have had it red. And, what this bad day is talking about. It feels like we're not really in the whole story. Although but about what was asked about, let me look back at the, it did say what I was trying to get across. Let's see if that works. My goal with the poem is to evoke as much emotion as possible with the most simplistic language possible to suit the broadest audience possible. That's always a bad way to go. Is it too simplistic? Yes. You never want to. It's just a terrible goal. My goal with that poem is to evoke as much emotion as possible with the most simplistic language as possible to suit the broadest audience. Don't aim for a broad audience. That's not what we connect with in poems. Narrow, specify. We connect because the voice feels like a real, authentic person speaking to us about real, authentic people that are so idiosyncratic and unique that they're not universal at all. And we enter their shoes and get to see the world through their eyes because it's so precise and it's only them. And that's what we connect with. Universalizing and generalizing doesn't make the poem feel a broader connection with more people. It makes you feel less connected. So whatever that instinct is, pull off that one. Hit the brakes on that. Be more detailed and tell us the story. Okay. Let's take a look at the other one, and then we'll wrap this one up. This is shorter and even more sonnet-like. It might be even a sonnet out of the corner of my eye. Social post number 2 for Lightning Welk Pass. Okay, I like the concept. Lightning Welk Pass. I like that they have a social post, and it's the second one, not the first. I like the title. I don't know where it's going to go. Bree must amplify a call to action. An awareness campaign about the past being restored. The order and the class of trans Gulf migrants thriving needs traction. Folks on the gram will be like, OMG, when they learn crabs will crawl 300 miles. Oh my God. To spawn here now and time the swimming trials of small fish in the new hydrology. Bountiful life forms have returned, once lost, combing the substrate in refugium, but now lightning is giving birth to them. How can you not like the following post? This ecosystem and its people are preserving a universal treasure. So I like the like I said, I like the setup. I always like form, and I think the rhymes are nice. I like action, traction. The OMG, hydrology. There's some nice rhymes in there. The final couplet at the end feels very unsatisfying because it's not. People are a universal treasure. I see the really, really slant rhyme there, but it doesn't sound rhyming at all. And it feels a little off because of that. And it slips to a more sterile language. I think the main thing I'd work on is that last couplet. But I like some of the details. Bree must amplify a call to action, an awareness campaign about the past being restored. Nice line break there, too, with the enjambment. That's the kind where the rhythm feels nice. You like it. The order and the class of trans Gulf migrants thriving needs traction. Folks on the gram will be like, OMG. I like this shift, too, to super vernacular. That's fun. When they learn crabs will crawl. And I do like the... it predicts that I will be like, oh my God, and that I am like, oh my God. That's a really cool fact. When they learn crabs will crawl 300 miles to spawn here and now and time the swimming trials of small fish in the new hydrology. I think there's a really good riff and a run on that. Bountiful life forms have returned once lost, combing the substrate in refugium. So this one, it feels like this had a real flow and it was like playing and having fun. Down here, with the bountiful life forms have returned once lost, combing the substrate in refugium, but now lightning is giving birth to them. I think it loses the energy and playfulness. I think these lines are off. I like the sort of voltaic transition here. How can you not like the following post? So I like that. I like that idea to turn there. And then if the post was something a little more satisfying, I think that aspect would really work. So I think the lines to play with, and they're just not there yet, are this, which feels clunky and awkward, and this, which just doesn't live up to the music of the poem and doesn't hit you with a surprise that you think it might. So play with those two, and I think the poem works really well. Yeah. Abigail Cargo says, who is Bree, the person posting Instagram posts or the speaker of the poem? I thought it was the person, the social media manager for the pass. And Jamie Thomas says it's so weird and interesting. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. It is. It's the weirdness and, like I said before, like the idiosyncrasy. the specificness of that. The lightning bolt pass. It's a social media post with Bree and these crabs. Like the detail in that, the specific detail, are what make the poem interesting. And backing up and universalizing and generalizing and trying to do that, it's not interesting to us. I understand the impulse. Everybody like has that thought at some point in the writing, but it's an incorrect thought. That's not how our brains actually work when we're reading. Yeah. Yeah, as Jamie Thomas says, I agree. It tries a little too hard at the end, but this was a lot of fun. Yeah, a great summary. Yeah, Venture Capital says, lightning is giving birth to them as a moment of genuine good strangeness, but it arrives without preparation and vanishes into, how can you not like the following post? Yeah, I guess maybe I should have said that too, because I do like lightning as giving birth to them. I do like that. Anyway. But it's just the lead-in. It's too stark, and it's hard to figure out who them is referring to at the same time, too. There's just not enough there, even though it's interesting. And Lisa Seidenberg says, I like more about Bree. That's a good, we could go a little more about Bree. Maybe that's what's sort of missing here, where we went off the rails a little bit. Maybe we could bring back Bree in these lines. Like, Bree would like to remind you, blah, 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 and then make this a little bit make more sense. And then we jump into that, and then we do a more interesting last line. And it's a lot of things to like about this poem, though. So, yeah. PMB says, what is the action Bree is calling for? It is an awareness of the past being restored. So this past is being reopened. Okay, well, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for sharing your thoughts and opinions about this poem and the other two. Once again, that poet was Joe Red from Michigan. And Jamie Thomas says, I want to meet this poet in person. I bet they're a great conversationalist. I agree, too. And Jesse Cochrane wants to learn more about these crabs. Again, I agree. I think it's really interesting. The more you can put in there about that, the better. So thanks for sharing that. Once again, that was Joe Red. Thanks to all the poets who shared their work today. Hope it was helpful. That is always the goal. And that's going to wrap up the critique for this week. Now, next week on the Critique of the Week, or not next week on the Rattlecast, our guest is going to be, right there, Richard Gilbert. Now, Richard Gilbert was the feature on episode number 6. So over 300 episodes ago, back when the technical hurdles of doing this were very large, and I was juggling a lot and having a difficult sound all the time, figuring out how to do a live stream. Richard was on with profound insights into what haiku and poetry are. His previous book is Poetry as Consciousness, and that's how he sees it. This is sort of an upgrade and an in-depth, more in-depth look at that same topic. It's called Haiku Language Thought, about how haiku is a kind of conscious state, an in-between between sort of fantasy and reality, this third place. And what is that place? It's somehow combining the two into new meaning or something kind of spiritual, but we're not really spiritual folks, so how do we describe it? We don't know. But it's going to be really fun to talk again to Richard Gilbert, have more of his insights into haiku. He's one of the best people at explaining complicated haiku, too. I love him reading something that I'm like, what is that? And then he explains it, and it's really fun to listen to. It's going to be really great talking to Richard Gilbert once again. That's Riddlecast number 319. The prompt for this week was to write a poem, I assume. Usually you want a poem to be a poem. Write a poem that begins with an ordinary parenting event that snowballs into something more. That was your prompt for this week. The guest, Richard Gilbert. Monday, November 24th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.